Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by my co-host John Harris. As always, we are back to share our thoughts and reactions to Week 12 of the 2023-2024 NFL season, of course. So we'll dive right into that in a second. Gonna provide some personal updates, as if you were following along last week. Just because a quick one, we'll mention again probably in our picks of week 13, but our little fantasy head-to-head, we were just talking about it before we hit the record button. But yeah, basically we're gonna I forced the game 3 for lack of a better phrase. And
okay, you didn't. Kyron Williams forced a game 3.
Hey, listen, he was on my team, and I mean, I'm the one that did pick him up.
You did pick him up, but
off waivers for $2 on September 13th.
That man destroyed me.
That was very unfortunate. Yeah, and then not to mention, you also played the highest score in regards to your personal matchup last week, so that sucked because you've had that, as you've mentioned, you've had that kind of unluckiness the past few weeks.
I am a playoff team with the most points against, second most points scored, the most points against. Ridiculous.
Luckily, there's the old median there, and that's why we've talked about it. We love the median, and that's one of the good things for it. But yeah, so anyways, goes down to a head-to-head between John and myself, literally, for the little in-season tournament, I guess you could call it. Survivor pool, is what it technically is, but a little in-season Survivor tournament in that Dynasty League. So, and just also made another week where I had a better week than John, at least money wise. We both were positive though, so I think that's a first, because you've had some. I know you've obviously had some positive weeks, but we never both had a positive week. So that was good for us. A little, I guess, added Thanksgiving / Black Cyber, I don't know, whatever, Black Friday, Cyber Monday bonus in a sense. But yeah, nonetheless, we got 16 games to dive into, so let us go into that. We're going to start, obviously, with the games that were on Thanksgiving, because we had a couple, as always. So let's start with the opening one in order, with my Green Bay Packers getting a surprising win over the Detroit Lions. And it was 29-22. It was mostly in the first quarter in regards to Packers scoring, and they held off the Lions later down the line. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Lions kind of dropping one here that we thought that they would kind of handle?
Yeah, this just feels like a little bit more of the Lions kind of getting exposed. I still think Detroit's a good team. I still think that obviously they're probably going to win the division, considering what happened on Monday night as well. But at the end of the day, I don't want to read too much into this one because it's tough to beat a team twice. If we remember, Detroit played Green Bay earlier in the year. They had a solid win, and now the reverse happens. The interesting part about this series is that they each won on the opposing team's home field. But I feel like this was a bit more of a embarrassing loss for Detroit, not only because you lose to the Packers, who at the time were 4-6, but you did so at home and you did so on Thanksgiving, and it happened to be the most watched Detroit Lions Thanksgiving game of all time. So the most amount of eyes were on Detroit that has ever happened on a Thanksgiving game for them, and they lost. So that's kind of unfortunate, but yeah, I don't know. It just feels like Detroit, out of kind of the general consensus NFC quote-unquote contenders, just have probably the most holes. We saw they lost 3 fumbles in this game, and it feels like over the weeks, the turnovers are becoming more and more of a problem with Jared Goff, whether it's interceptions or fumbles. It just seems like teams are kind of starting to get some pressure onto him, and I was really impressed, honestly, with the Packers' defensive line, because everyone knows how good this Detroit offensive line is, and it really felt like Green Bay was able to control the line of scrimmage a lot in this one and kind of just have their way up front, preventing Detroit from really establishing the run game consistently. And obviously it helps that on the other side, Jordan Love and the offense was moving the ball well, getting the ball in the end zone, so Detroit was having to play from behind, and that forced them into passing situations, and then you put the ball in Jared Goff's hands. So yeah, ultimately, great game from the Packers. And to further my point too on the controlling the line of scrimmage, not only they control it on the defensive side, but on the offensive side, they also allowed 0 sacks. So Packers offensive line played well. LaFleur called a good game. Jordan Love got the ball out quick, and there you go. Packers get the win.
Yeah, I threw that interesting stat, towards the end of the game that per at Jay Kuda on Twitter, he had, I'm guessing he did the research since he did not reference anyone else. But I mentioned he mentioned that since the AFL NFL merger, the Detroit Lions are 0-12 on Thanksgiving when the moon is in a waxing gibbous phase. Kudos to him for doing that obscure research, I guess. Just fortunate for the Lions. That's the only reason I lost. But no, in all seriousness, you mentioned the turnovers. I didn't think it would be a concern here because it was in Detroit, indoors, where at least the elements won't cause an issue, because that's been an issue for Jared Goff, dating back to the Rams days. But we did see, you mentioned the pressure. Just some unforced errors. I mean, I know a couple of the fumbles were forced, but even, I forget if it was like the second or third one. One of them, Goff kind of made a run, and it wasn't like an amazing strip. It kind of just looked like, he kind of just got flipped over and just lost the ball, per se. Two hands. Come on, Jared. But as a Packer fan, I'll take it. You mentioned in regards to exposing them. I think we're starting to see Lions. They have the game cannot get away from them, because, like you said, they don't have a great passing attack in terms of just a standalone. We got to get back in the game and just shotgun. We need some surgical drives. They got to have balance on both sides in terms of run and then the play action. And once again, like we kind of hit on before the season, outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, no one else is really scaring you in terms of on the outside. Like Jameson Williams, he's been getting going lately, and Laporte is a solid, good tight end, but he's still a rookie. And and we've mentioned before, Jared Goff, there are limitations there for him. So, and then on the opposite side of the ball too, just lack of difference makers on defenses was a concern for Detroit. Because yes, you have Aiden Hutchinson, he's great, he's awesome, but once again, who else is really going to step up, especially in the secondary or in the linebacking core? And we didn't see that this game. This was a game that Christian Watson arguably had his best. I think this is literally statistically best game of the year. So that's poor. And once again, it's a Packer team without Aaron Jones. So the run game wasn't too big of a factor. But nonetheless, Love was able to be efficient, and the key was he wasn't forcing any turnovers. So it's definitely a concern for Detroit going down the line. Once again, I don't think the world's going to fall, and I think you're on the same boat too. Like, they're going to make the playoffs, but the big question is, and they're going to have to answer going forward, is can you play from behind? Can you evolve your pass game more? And can your defense hang with some of the better offenses when it comes to playoff time? Like we mentioned before, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Dallas, like those three. Like, can your defense get stops if it's a day where your offense is not going to get the run game going, or the other team's offense is just clicking and scoring touchdowns? So tough one for Detroit at home. And this one definitely keeps alive the Packers playoff chances. So that's good and bad in a sense. And the only other thing I wanted to note was in regards to turnovers too, last thing is, like, also love Dan Campbell. I love that usually he likes to gamble, but that call early or midway through the third, the fake punt at their own 23, that, I don't know, but obviously hindsight, but obviously that was kind of the nail in the coffin, it felt like, because then Packers get the ball, only got to go 20 yards, score a touchdown. They do so. It's 2-score came from there, and it was that was basically all she wrote for the rest of the game. So, good little win for my Packers. I'm seeing some Packer fans. It's funny because I feel like Packer fans, we've gone a little bit self-aware. Some of them are a little bit scared about the fact that we have hope going down the line and a relatively easy schedule, but obviously we got to convert that to even get in. So, good win for the Packers, as we both picked Detroit, so we're both wrong there to cover the spread too. But hey, it happens. It's the NFL. Weird ball bounces in weird different ways. But speaking of covering the spread, let's go over to one of the other Thanksgiving games, the second one, and it is yours. And this one went the way we thought it would, or especially the way you thought it would, because you bet kind of big on this one, and you definitely got your payout as your Dallas Cowboys. They beat the Washington Commanders 45-10. think the score pretty much says it all. I mean, if I remember, I was eating during this one, so I didn't see it live. But apparently, I guess Dak just straight up started eating, huh? Like literally eating the second half because it was that bad, huh?
Yeah, they at some point, on Thanksgiving, Dallas, starting with Zeke a while back, they started doing those the Salvation Army red pot. I don't know what they call it, but the big red pot that they have. They do celebrations with it, and they come up with new stuff every year. Zeke was always jumping in it, and I guess the thing that they're doing now is, I don't know how the logistics of this worked and if this was like planned way ahead of time, but they had like a bag of turkey in the pot. So Cavante Turpin jumps in there, and then like Dak pulls it out and just starts eating in the middle of the game. And they're totally going to get fined for that because it's the no fun league. But, Jerry's fine with it because I think they fine him for the whole celebration in the past too, before they, relax the celebration rules. And Jerry covers it during the Thanksgiving games because, it brings attention to the Salvation Army, who's like, the Cowboys. Moves. Yeah. It's the Cowboys like big sponsor for Thanksgiving stuff. So it brings attention to them whenever they do that. So anyway, Dallas, I mean, they crushed them. Washington, it kind of went as expected. Their defense was not able to do much in terms of stopping the pass, which is really what gave me a lot of the confidence that I had in Dallas in this game. Dak had 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Tony Pollard got involved on the ground. Sam Howell was able to have some success, but in large part, it did not really result in that many scoring drives. It was kind of a lot of empty yards, if you will. So, yeah, Dallas takes the win pretty cut and dry in that game, to be honest.
Yeah, we'll talk more about this topic later, but I just, we mentioned especially recently, and I feel like just overall many people feel this way. Kind of an open MVP race, and to kind of quote your boy Micah Parsons, keeping the same energy. I mean, can we? I think Dak Prescott needs to be kind of should be thrown into this MVP conversation because. Just looking at his raw numbers, everyone coming to the year, everyone's like the interceptions. He's done a pretty good job about that. Only 6 interceptions, 23 touchdowns
and
for those.
For the record, 3 of those came against the Niners. So yes. The other 3 throughout the year.
Yeah. So and I think he's only looking like let me double check, but it's looking like he's only second for the QBR people. Brock Purdy's number 1, obviously, but he's got a super team around him. But guess who's number 2? Dak Prescott. So I'm just saying, like. Once again, we always talk about, the media always scrutinizes the Cowboys. Where's the love now? Because I'm just saying, like, and obviously, yes, there's going to be the people, he's got to beat the Eagles. Okay, we'll get his opportunity. Even then, like last game against the Eagles, and like he played pretty damn good there too, and I can't really fault him for that one. So it'll be an interesting race down the line. That's all I want to point out. I don't have any comments in regards to the game because, y'all just put a beat down on them. Washington, they got things they got to figure out. Obviously, they let go of Jack Del Rio. We'll see if Ron Rivera will stick around to the end, or if he's going to eventually be on the way out too. And they kind of hit the reset button, which like we've said, the trade deadline kind of indicated so. So we'll see if the exodus continues for the Commanders and some of their personnel in regards to their coaching staff. But big win for Dallas as they stay atop in that NFC race for the 1 seed. But let's
just on the Dak thing real quick. I will say too, I feel like he isn't necessarily getting the buzz for the MVP as of right now, just because of the teams that they've been playing. But to close out the season, they play Seattle, Philadelphia, Detroit, Buffalo, and Miami. So if they win 4 of those games and Dak is still killing it, I think that the conversation could obviously heat up quite a bit more. But obviously they got to go out there and they got to do it.
Yeah, but yeah, I just once again, I just want to put it out there that I'm, as a non-Cowboy fan, so that there's no, no sort of, pushback. There should, honestly, in my opinion, there shouldn't be. But obviously,
if anyone is doubting what you're saying, though, go look at the stats, because Dak is like 2nd in completion percentage, like 7th in total yards. He's up there in touchdowns, only has 6 picks, which is lower than like
2nd in
Mahomes,
touchdowns.
Allen, Hurts, all the other guys. He's 2nd in touchdowns, so like he is up there with the elite of the elite in terms of statistics on the year. Over the year, the only bad game he had was against the Niners, and the entire Cowboys roster had a bad game. I mean, the defense allowed 40-something points. The offensive line was just in shambles. Pollard did nothing. CeeDee Lamb wasn't involved. Like, everybody had a bad game against the Niners. Other than that, they've been killing it. So, yeah, that's why we're bringing that up.
And sorry, just one last point, too. I mentioned the second in touchdowns. Guess he was first. And we'll talk about it later. Josh Allen, and Josh Allen's played one more game than Dak, too. So that kind of helps.
Yeah.
So, once again, who knows? We'll see and get another week and a fair sample size. Maybe Dak is number one there. And once again, he's done a very good job taking care of the ball, which was, once again, people wanted to harp on that, jump on that last year. But anyways, like I mentioned, Dallas takes care of business. And unfortunately, too, the other Thanksgiving game after the Cowboys won was pretty much a blowout also. So if you're like me, I was struggling to watch this one. I put in our group chat because... the Niners, they handled their business, and they handled their business pretty quickly as they jumped out ahead of the Seahawks early and never really looked back as the 49ers win 31-13 over the Seattle Seahawks. In this one, what were your thoughts, if any, in regards to the Niners getting the win here?
I mean, there was actually potential life in Seattle in the third quarter because coming out of halftime, I mean, they scored 10 points in the third quarter and shut out the Niners, but then they just kind of fell apart a bit in the fourth, couldn't complete the comeback. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, the Niners are the better team. They have the better roster. It is what it is. And realistically, the only reason that they really kind of had this attempt at the comeback was because Brock Purdy kind of let him back in with that pick six. But for the most part, San Francisco was able to do whatever they wanted. McCaffrey had a big game. Deebo Samuel was involved. I mean, their defense completely stifled the Seahawks offense. Like I said, the only touchdown they had was the pick six. Otherwise, it was 2 field goals. So, yeah, San Francisco, at this point, they've kind of started to separate themselves from Seattle, where a few weeks ago it looked like maybe Seattle could challenge for the division. Things are only going to get tougher for the Seahawks as they continue with Dallas on Thursday. Not a short week because they both played Thursday, but still just weird timing with the holidays and everything and practice schedule and all that. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough road for Seattle in terms of winning the division, but they're still in the hunt for a potential wild card spot.
Yeah, we'll see if they can hang on because you mentioned that tough stretch, potentially no Kenneth Walker. I mean, he wasn't in against San Francisco and may not be, probably not going to be playing against Dallas next week. And like I've mentioned before, it's just Seattle's really dependent. They're not great schematically like San Francisco is, and obviously not as talented. But as we know, they do have talent, but they are definitely more dependent upon just their guy beating their guy as opposed to the coaching staff drawing some plays up and finding some tendency breakers to help their team get the guys open and make life easier for Geno Smith too, who's had didn't have a great game, obviously Geno, but I mean he was under pressure all game. I mean 6 sacks and still coming off. He hurt his was his shoulder I think the previous week, and that was still a question going into this one on a short week. So who knows if he was fully him on top of that. I mean nonetheless he got out there and played. And yeah, I mean, it was just a beatdown, and we'll see if Seattle can kind of stay afloat, especially in regards to the wild card race. So because they said as for this one, they're 6-5, and like we mentioned, have a tough stretch and maybe missing some key guys going forward. So yeah, tough loss for them, and obviously Niners keep trucking along to 8-3. So obviously we'll see if they can keep moving on there. Let's go over to one of the other specials. We had our first Black Friday, I believe it was our first game on first in a long time. First game, Black Friday game. It was supposed to be this hyped up game because it was before the season. It was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and obviously he got hurt. And then it doesn't help that going into this one too, they decided to it's time to throw in Nick Boyle. Well, Jets fans, you got Nick Boyle. And this is what you got. You got the Dolphins beating all 34-13, and offense. I'll let you go first, but what were your thoughts, at least in regards to the Dolphins beatdown?
It's Tim Boyle, by the way, not Nick Boyle.
Excuse me, Tim. Sorry, but
yeah, I mean, I did my little small aside about Tim Boyle last week, so if you want to see the thoughts on Tim Boyle and the mention of his college stats and how like questions of how this guy's even in the NFL, go look at that. But yeah, I mean, 2 picks. He only threw for 179 yards. I don't really know what like the Jets were expecting out of Tim Boyle. I really feel like the one saving grace for Zach Wilson that he really adds to this offense that Tim will never be able to replicate at all is the mobility. Like Tim's not a mobile guy either, so Zach can actually move and maybe, extend some plays or even just run for it and like get some extra yardage. So I feel like that would be nice to have because quite frankly, with Tim out there, this looked like such a one-dimensional game. Miami just completely said, all right, we're going to stop the run. They were scoring on the other side, so the Jets had to abandon it pretty quickly, and they just had to start passing, and I don't think anybody's going to want Tim Boyle throwing it 38 times. And, I mean, your leading receiver is Garrett Wilson with 44 yards, so a lot of dump-offs, a lot of short underneath stuff. I mean, Brees Hall had 7 catches for 24 yards, so there just wasn't a lot going on with that offensive performance. Now, Tua tried his best to allow the Jets back into the game with a couple turnovers, but quite frankly, even he couldn't screw this up that bad. That was a little harsh. Two was actually a little bit in that, but he did have a couple bad turnovers. But regardless, the Dolphins surprisingly kind of had their way with that Jets defense. Raheem Mostert scores 2 touchdowns, including that one late that just really screwed me in fantasy, but whatever. Jalen Waddle was able to have a big game, 8 catches, 114 yards. Tyreek also had over 100 and a touchdown. So, yeah, kind of a failure on all cylinders for the Jets. I mean, like, getting the 2 picks is nice, but when you allow 2 100-yard receivers and almost a 100-yard rusher, I feel like for a defense as talented as the Jets have, that was kind of a failure of a game. But even if they had a solid game, they were still going to lose anyway because their offense was completely inept. So, yeah. There you go. First ever Black Friday game.
So yeah, it is Tim Boyle. I gotta mix it with Nick Boyle. Of course, Nick Boyle, former tight end of the Ravens. So, but hey, maybe they could use Nick out there to help block. But nonetheless, you mentioned just the ineptitude of the New York Jets offense. I mean, we saw that and to be expected. And it's funny now that Rodgers is, of course, I assumed this would be the case, but now he made sure to stay. Yeah, well, it depends on, the play. If we got shot at the playoffs, if I come back, well, yeah, because it's looking like y'all ain't going to make the playoffs even, right now, Aaron. But and in regards to, Miami, I will give the Jets defense a little bit of credit. They didn't really let the big plays happen. It was just a lot of kind of Miami just executing. And we talked about before, too. I mean, I don't care how good of a defense you are, you give the opposing offense the ball so many times, it's only a matter of time for the damn breaks. Because, defense did force a pick six. It's just, for a while, they're their only touchdown because the Garrett Wilson one was literally such garbage time. Like 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Game was already decided at that point. I was encouraging, like you mentioned, Jalen Waddle. He's dealing with injuries and such, so good to see him kind of be the number 2, or really kind of the number 1. He had more yards than Tyreek here, but just help out that offense. Obviously, Mostert running, I think you mentioned, is big for them and their balance. But I mean, all I want to say is this is what you wanted, Jet fans. You wanted him gone, Zach Wilson gone, and the result really wasn't much better, like you mentioned, John. Like the offense was terrible. It put me to sleep, and even at was 2 p.m, I decided to take an afternoon sleeper on this one. I'm sure I wasn't the only one to do so. So we'll see if they continue to ride with Tim Boyle, or if we see some Trevor Siemian going forward. For the Jets, but I imagine, in my opinion, look at their schedule, but I think it's season over at this point. Let's look on to next year if I'm a Jets fan, but I'm not. So, Dolphins, they continue to get another win on the board, a big one in terms of the AFC as they go to 8-3, while the New York Jets, they go to 4-7, and the season that was promised just continues to fall apart going forward. So we'll see what happens there, but let's move on over to the games that occurred on Sunday. Unfortunately, granted, most of these games weren't great beforehand, and Sunday there were a handful of solid games, but a lot of them not great by many standards. Let's start was one of the games that was actually good on Sunday. And it was, especially in the early slate, it was the Jaguars. They get a big win over the Texans, 24-21. Unfortunately, the Texans missed the field goal towards the end of regulation to send it to overtime, which would have made this game greater. But hey, you can't have it all. Nonetheless, though, John, what were your thoughts here in regards to the Jaguars kind of bouncing back after a rough couple of weeks and kind of killing the Texans' momentum here?
Yeah, I think this was a good win. Obviously, not necessarily just because of what it does for Jacksonville, but if they had lost this one, Houston would be sitting at 7-4, Jacksonville at 8-4, and now the division starts to get a little dicey. So this gives them a good cushion, and just I think it's a confidence builder too, because on the other side, CJ Stroud and that offense were able to do a lot, and yet Jacksonville was still able to find a way to win. And I mean, just think back to the beginning of the season when Jacksonville's offense was kind of the reason that they were struggling a little bit. The reason they won this game was because of their offense. Trevor Lawrence, 364 yards through the air. ETN was kind of inefficient, which is starting to become a little bit of a concerning trend, and something that I've pointed out a few weeks now, where I just really don't understand kind of what's going on with this Jaguars run game. They did involve Dearness Johnson a little bit, but he was also inefficient. Tank Bigsby had like one carry, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they keep moving forward with this run game, because I do feel like once we get towards playoff football, it's going to be more needed. But I don't know. We'll see. But overall, yeah, I feel like this was a really good win for Jacksonville, and they needed this one pretty big. And this is certainly a big indicator for the divisional race moving forward. And for CJ Stroud and the gang, maybe a little bit disheartening, considering that if they had won this one, there's a shot that they could have won the division his rookie year. But the fact that they were able to be this close with Jacksonville in his rookie year, I mean, they beat him the first time they played, and they narrowly beat him a second time. Pretty impressive stuff from Houston, not going to lie. I mean, the fact that they're 6-5 at this point in the year, contending for a playoff spot, hats off to that entire coaching staff and that organization, because I did not think they were capable of it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I literally, when I was doing my season predictions, Houston was the first team that I eliminated, like just mentally. I was like, oh, Houston's not making the playoffs. Don't have to worry about, even thinking about them. But yeah, like you mentioned, here they are. They competed and they almost won this one, obviously. Honestly, though, Jacksonville probably could have given themselves more of a cushion. I don't know if you saw at end of half, they're at the 1 yard line, 1 second left. They decided to try to run it in. They got stuffed. You mentioned, and I don't know. I just feel like they're like, I understand you have to obviously hindsight, but maybe take the points. Like, once again, I'm all for aggression, but I just feel like we're kind of getting to the dangerous point. Some of these coaches are, especially, where they're a little bit too over aggressive at times.
Listen, Doug knew that I had ETN, all right? He knew that I had ETN in my fantasy games, and I needed it. It's just unfortunate that the line decides to suck on the goal line, and Travis just can't punch it in the last month of football. I don't know, but he was trying to help me out, okay? That was a me thing. Well, just didn't work.
Anyway, it bit them in the butt, because they came out, and then they threw a pick in the first drive of the second half. Houston gets a touchdown, and as opposed to 16-14, you still got the lead. Now it's 13-14. You got a ball game, but kudos to the Jags for still battling through, getting Calvin Ridley involved, because we've seen that connection has been up and down at times, and obviously I think that's a huge key for them, is getting him going, and maybe that'll start reopening things up in the run game in some of those lanes and such. But and obviously also Jags also missed a field goal as well at one point. It was a 55 yarder, so kind of a long one, but it could have been worse in terms of that. And for Houston, I think it's just tough that you lose that way. Stroud gets you down to field goal-ish range. It's still a 58-yard field goal. So once again, still pretty tough, especially for a kicker that wasn't Matt Amendola, who wasn't their starting kicker to start the year. Because remember, Kymie Fairbairn got hurt. So this guy was not even rostered. I'm not trying to dog on him. I'm just trying to be realistic.
I will say, too, his previous long was 2 years ago, and it was only 49 yards. So he's never actually even technically made a 50-yard field goal in the NFL. So I'm sure he can, but he's just never done it yet.
Yeah, he's got to do it. So, it's one of those where, sometimes it happens that way, and then it just obviously didn't go through for them. So, Houston's still a young team. You're going to go through these young growing pains. Or man, you had these tough losses where you're right there. I mean, really just part of the NFL. So yeah, I'm sure that they'll take it on the chin, move forward, and it'd be very interesting to see if they can make some noise and make a playoff push here. Because yeah, 6-5, like you alluded to, just I don't think anyone, even Houston fans, did not expect them to be 6-5. Going into December with a shot for the real shot for the playoffs too. Considering the likes of Cincinnati and such basically being eliminated. So, I know they're not mathematically eliminated Cincinnati, but no Joe Burrow, no chance. We'll talk about them later. But yeah, good win for the Jags, like you mentioned, to get that cushion in their own division, and then 8-3. I'm gonna pull up the standings. I'm pretty sure standing was conference. They're at the 3 seed, but Baltimore, only 9-3. Kansas City 8-3 also. So yeah, if things fall a certain way, like Jacksonville could sneakily be a 2 or heck, who knows? Maybe they can get the 1 seed and get that bye week for a wild card. But we'll see how the rest of the year plays out for them. They do have a tough stretch in regards to run defenses going forward too. So there may be more tough times ahead for ETN. Who knows? We'll see going forward. But let's go from there to the aforementioned Cincinnati Bengals, as that was one of the stinkers of the week. But we knew this was going to be a stinker. At least, those that know knew. Because obviously no Burrow for the Bengals, and they did hang tough, but nonetheless, the Steelers win this one 16-10. A lot of big things for the Steelers. Their first 400-yard game in 58 games. So even pre-Matt Canada, before he was even hired, they had this streak going. But nonetheless, their offense came to life. Yards wise, not points wise, because they still had issues scoring, as they only beat the Bengals, like I said, by 6. But what were your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Steelers basically out-Steelering the Bengals?
Certainly an interesting game. I mean, everybody was kind of expecting maybe this would be a George Pickens, Jalen Warren kind of situation, because they've just kind of been the two more explosive playmakers on the offense. But no, Najee Harris, 6.6 yards per carry. He doubles Jalen Warren's yard total with only 2 more carries. He also gets a touchdown. And postman Pat Freiermuth coming back from injury. He has a huge day, having 120 yards. Only the 8th tight end this year to have over 100 yards in a game. So yeah, good for the Steelers. This was definitely their most explosive day of offense, and yet it only got them 16 points. So very Steelers kind of game. Very ugly, but they found a way to win. So that's all that matters. Honestly, I have no thoughts about the rest of it, especially for Cincinnati, because they're just one of those teams that without Joe Burrow, I don't have any belief in them.
Yeah, I'm so worried Pittsburgh. Why obviously it is obviously looking better without Canada, but is it going to be a great leap? Obviously, I don't think so. I think lack of explosive plays still an issue. I mean, most of their drives, even a touch 14 plays, 79 yards. That's just matriculating down the field, and same with their field goal drives. And could have probably had another field goal, but Jalen Warren did fumble, so that's why they also early in the game, and it was midway through the first, so maybe that's why they leaned more on Najee. And regardless, though, Najee, like you mentioned, had a more efficient game and literally had he had probably more explosive runs too, because he had a 22-yarder. So yeah, for Pat Freiermuth, that was a surprise, especially just came off IR and all that. So I did not expect it as someone who had him in fantasy in our league. I benched him over Cole Kmet, but so now that decision's a little bit tougher. But yeah, nonetheless, not much else to say. Bengals, they're just trying to make do with what they got, and that's unfortunately Jake Browning. And there's sorry Jake, but there's a drop off between you and Joe Burrow, and I just don't think you're capable of carrying the Bengals offense on that side to help them get in the playoffs. But nonetheless, good one for Pittsburgh. They're 7-4, and they are also right in the mix of things, surprisingly. Although it's just every week we've just been saying that for Pittsburgh. So they continue their hot streak, and only 2 more wins, and they secured that above 500 streak for Mike Tomlin. So it's very likely they may end up getting that as well. So good for them, but obviously they still got to do that. So let's move from one stinker to another. Let's go to everyone's favorite division and one of your favorite teams, which I'm saying jokingly, and that is the NFC South. Going to that Crucial matchup between the Falcons and Saints. Falcons end up getting the win here, 24-15. Kind of let the leash off of Bijan Robinson, let him free. He got a few more carries than we have seen in recent weeks. And we saw a little bit of Drake London get involved. Still not a lot of Kyle Pitts, but nonetheless, Falcons win here, John, over the Saints. What were your thoughts?
For the Saints, they just could not capitalize on their opportunities. They had a lot of successful drives. They just stalled out whenever they got across midfield. I don't know why that is. I don't know if this was just strong defensive adjustments from Atlanta, bend but don't break kind of situation. I mean, the Saints had 6 drives where they got into field goal range, maybe even more. I'm not sure if there was any situations where they went for it on a fourth down or anything.
Because one was a pick 6.
Yeah, so I mean, well, actually, if one was a pick 6, then they have 7 because I'm pretty sure they also missed a field goal. So
correct, 7
drives into field goal range, and they weren't able to convert any of those drives into touchdowns, and they only got 5 field goals out of those too. So 5 of 7 on your drives resulting in points, and all of them are field goals. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough to win because that 15 points that only takes 2 drives from the opposing team if they can result in touchdowns, and 1 2-point conversion, boom, there you go. So, yeah, not good enough from the Saints offense, despite the fact that they were able to move the ball well. They had over 400 yards of offense. Like I said, it was in large part they'd get 20, 30, 40, 50 yards, 60 yards, and then boom, drive stalls out. And that pick was in the end zone, too. It was like a 99-yard pick 6 or something like that. So, or it was very long. They were basically on the doorstep of scoring a touchdown. And, they just weren't able to get it done. So, unfortunate for the Saints offense and good on the Falcons. I mean, I've berated them many times for their lack of usage for their stars. They used Bijan a lot. He had 19 total touches. Drake London had 91 receiving yards. Still would love to see Kyle Pitts get more involved, but honestly, they only completed 13 passes, and when 8 of those are going to Bijan and Drake London, that means there's only 5 more completions to go around. He got 2 of them, so he was their third leading receiver. So, it is what it is. It was a game in which they were in control. They were running the ball. They had the lead at halftime. So, I mean, they just kind of played conservative football from there on out and didn't want Desmond Ridder to try and shoot them in the foot any more than he already did with his 2 picks. So, as much as I dislike it, because honestly, despite the fact that it was a solid performance from some of the players, I would still like Arthur Smith to go because I just don't agree with him philosophically when it comes to the way that he approaches football. I can't deny that this was an impressive win, especially against a resilient Saints defense and an offense that does have talent. Unfortunately, Chris Olave did get injured and did not return to the game, but you still have Alvin Kamara. And actually, now that I'm saying that, I think that's kind of it because Taysom Hill, but Michael Thomas was out. I'm pretty sure that Rashid Shaheed went out at some point and didn't come back either. So they were kind of thin on offense, but still, they have some talent.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, they had opportunities. And yeah, it just seems like red zone offense seems to be an issue for them, punching those opportunities in for 7. Because, like I said, they've got a lot of yards. And then also didn't help that when they got one of those interceptions that Desmond Ridder gifted them, they had a couple explosive plays, and Taysom Hill fumbled off a run. And then, that led to another long Atlanta drive for a touchdown. And then the other interception by Ridder, they couldn't even capitalize on because it was already in New Orleans territory. Atlanta was knocking on the door, and then they got the pick, and then Tyrann Mathieu got tackled or whatever, and then that was the end of half basically. So a little bit unfortunate that the Saints couldn't capitalize on that, but yeah, they did have opportunities to do so many times, and they had to settle for field goals. It reminded me a lot of when the Packers lost to the Falcons earlier this year, because that's what happened to us. So I think that's a little bit of kudos to the Atlanta Falcon defense for. Like you mentioned, I think literally that is their philosophy. Just bend, don't break. They'll get in the red zone. They start doing some creative things and have some good tendency breakers there. But we'll see how long they can stay afloat. With that win, they do gain control of the NFC South and are the leader now. Although both teams are 5-6, and we'll see how this all plays out between this gross division. And we'll talk more about some of their division mates too. As we move along here. But so crucial win, like I mentioned, for the Falcons. Let's go to one of the other teams in contention for that division, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. unfortunately for them, they suffered a tough loss because they did need that win to at least tie be 5-6 along with them, but they fall to 4-7. They lose to the Indianapolis Colts. Colts win 27-20 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What were your thoughts in regards to the Colts win here?
Solid win for the Colts. It is unfortunate that Jonathan Taylor had one of his better games on the year and unfortunately messes up his thumb, I guess, and is now going to be missing a couple weeks. But a solid result nonetheless. They're now sitting at 6-5, and the AFC, man, is really heating up for these playoff spots. I mean, talking of the Texans, who are also 6-5, like this division is not far off from being an open race. Like if that game was won by the Texans, once again, we already talked about what their record would be, but Indianapolis would be right there in that mix as well. And who knows, maybe Jacksonville can drop a game or two, and Indianapolis could jump up in there as well. So it's certainly interesting for the Colts moving forward. Even if they don't win the division, they're in the hunt for a playoff spot. And I liked what they were able to do in this game. They were able to get a lot of their playmakers involved. Honestly, Indianapolis feels like the polar opposite of the Atlanta Falcons. Michael Pittman is always heavily involved. Jonathan Taylor heavily involved here. And they still found a way to get Zach Moss and Josh Downs in the game plan as well. So a solid offensive performance from the Colts overall. Gardner Minshew did his thing. And for the Buccaneers, I mean, it's unfortunate you lost. I kind of wish that Rachaad White maybe would have got a touchdown selfishly for fantasy, and that Mike Evans wouldn't have scored two of them because, as you mentioned earlier, I had to play the highest score, and shocker, he had Mike Evans. But they were able to do their thing offensively. It's just unfortunate that for the Buccaneers, I mean, we're seeing that they've kept the same sort of general roster over the years with minor additions, but for the most part, like a lot of the key veterans are still here. Vita Vea, Levante David, Mike Evans, all these kind of guys are still on this team, and I think that we're starting to see a natural transition point for the Buccaneers. They're now sitting at 4-7. Their playoff hopes are probably done by this point, despite the division not being that good. It's not impossible, but they would have to basically win out the rest of the year to probably make it. And so it just feels like maybe you start to reevaluate. Do we trade Mike Evans to a contender? What about Levante David? He's still playing good football. What do we do with Devin White? Because obviously there's been the situation over the last handful of years where he hasn't necessarily been super happy, even though he's not necessarily one of the like older players. So I don't know. I just feel like this is certainly a season in which Tampa, following this year, is probably going to start to look themselves in the mirror and start to make a lot of decisions. And this felt like the game in which that mark was like truly set in the sand, because previously they were kind of just hovering around 500. They lose to San Francisco, but that's expected. Indianapolis is not a great team. If you're going to keep the season alive, this was the game to do it. They fall a little bit short, and I think that's just kind of the story of the season for them.
Yeah, and only thing I want to add is, hey, they may still have a little bit of life going down the line. I'm just looking at their schedule going forward. They have the Panthers.
Is it easy?
They have the Panthers twice still.
Okay.
They do have them coming up this next week. They have the Falcons again, so that could be.
Which, for the division race, that's huge,
Yes.
because if they beat the Panthers both times and they beat the Falcons, they're sitting at 7-7. Theoretically, I don't know. I assume there's games in between all those, but 7-7 if they have won those three, and there's room there. It's not impossible, and that's, I don't know, what are the other teams they play? Just out of curiosity.
So they do play the Packers. That's a big one just for wild card implications in case they want to sneak in
Packers
there.
are still alive.
Jaguars, that may be the tough one, and then they also do play the Saints. So they have 4 division games still left on the docket for them. That could maybe.
And playing the Falcons and Saints is big, because that if they can handle their business against the Panthers and one of the Packers or Jags game, then I feel like they could maybe have a spot where they hold their own destiny in their hands, depending on what happens in those Falcons and Saints games. Because if they can win both of those, then who knows? There's still a shot.
Yeah, who knows? But anything else you wanted to add, or are you done there?
No, that's it.
Yeah, I am. So yeah, and in regards to what you mentioned, all I wanted to throw was I am very impressed. I feel like I've said this a lot, but I'm going to say it again. Very impressed by the Colts and their offense. I mean, despite losing Anthony Richardson, it's starting to see the value of a Gardner Minshew, a very good backup. It's not amazing, but hey, he comes in, makes enough plays. The offense can still function enough where they can win against some of the teams that are equally as talented as them, as we saw here. You mentioned getting Michael Pittman constantly involved, and even Josh Downs too, the rookie wide receiver, and still Zach Moss, like you mentioned, who had a very, I would say, underwhelming career in Buffalo, but then now finds a home here in Indianapolis. And obviously Jonathan Taylor's the main guy, but he's been filling in really well as his number 2 / filling in while he was out for the beginning of the year. So interesting. Colts will be an interesting team to watch down the line. Obviously Tampa will be as well. But for Tampa, it just seems to be mistakes. Baker interception, and then the fumble on their last drive isn't really truly Baker's fault, but still it was a fumble, strip sack fumble, and that happens. So fortunate for the Bucs is also just in terms of their record. You got to remember too that tough Houston game where they probably thought that they had the game in hand, and then Stroud makes that amazing comeback, and that kind of also has led to this kind of tough stretch where they've lost, I think, 3 of their last 4, counting that one. So we'll see if they can right the ship against Carolina next week. Although Carolina may have the interim head coach energy, we'll get to Carolina probably later here down the line. But great one for the Colts, and we'll see. Yeah, like you mentioned, no one really expected them here, especially if you told people that they would be without Anthony Richardson. And here they are firmly in the wild card race. They would be in the playoffs if the playoffs started this week. So that goes to say a lot. But like John mentioned, they could also very well be in the conversation for the division title as well. So we'll see how that all pans out for them. Let's go over to the biggest stinker of the weekend. And this one we all expected. And it definitely was so, as it was the New York Giants getting the win over the New England Patriots. 10-7. Score kind of says it all. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Giants getting the win here?
Generational tanking job from Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Honestly, just masterful performance. You throw in Mac Jones for a little bit. 2 picks. All right, cool. Let's make it look like we're trying to win. We throw in Bailey Zappi. Oh, wait, he throws a pick too. I mean, they miss a field goal. Masterful tanking job from the Patriots. Fantastic stuff. They still scored a touchdown to make it look like they tried to win. Now, on a real note, these 2 teams are bad. They're just bad football teams. They don't have great defenses. They don't have great offenses. If there's anything that both teams can lean their hat on, it is their defenses, though. The Giants' defense has been solid. Any defense coached by Bill Belichick is, going to be relevant. So, the score is not surprising at all. For Giants fans, I assume they're pretty upset because this was one of the few remaining games that had major implications on the draft order. And now the Patriots are sitting at 2-9 and are looking like they could be in a spot to maybe draft a new quarterback, especially considering that against this Giants team, Mac Jones had 89 total yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 picks, and Bailey Zappi had 54 total yards, 0 touchdowns, and 1 pick. So clearly the QBs in the room are not working, which, we've ranted and raved in the past about the lack of weapons around these quarterbacks. So it's not like getting a new QB is going to fix everything, but at least, new face, maybe the locker room will buy in. So, yeah,
we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see what happens, obviously, with Bill Belichick, too, going forward. I think that would be a big domino if they do let him go and move on. But
the interesting part about them losing this game to that, though, is usually coaches, when they get a new quarterback, especially high in the draft, it kind of buys you a few years, because now it resets the timeline a little bit where you can wait maybe 2 or 3 years to see how that coach develops that guy. And I don't know, maybe Kraft wants to see if Belichick can develop the next QB. That said,
it's tough because Mac Jones was their first round guy. It was supposed to be their next bridge, and then I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if he's no, I'm not going to give you another chance, Bill. I gave you a chance with Mac Jones, and it didn't work out.
Yeah, that's why it's tough. Is that they've had young quarterbacks over the years, like Zappi, like Mac Jones, who they wanted to do that with, and it just hasn't panned out. And at the same time, I don't. Maybe Bill Belichick doesn't want to be there anymore because I remember, this is obviously a long time ago, but remember those rumors of he wanted to get rid of Tom Brady and he had been developing Jimmy G to like take over, and he wanted to build around Jimmy Garoppolo moving forward. And the Bob Kraft was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And he traded. Reportedly, he made the move to trade Jimmy Garoppolo to San Francisco. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. So we'll see with that whole situation, because I could see a situation where it ends for either reason. Either they don't want Bill anymore, or Bill doesn't want to be there anymore.
We'll see. We eventually.
Because it also, sorry
No,
to cut you off, but it also could be a situation kind of like what happened with Sean Payton, where you kind of made this mess and you don't really want to clean it up, so you just leave, right?
Yeah.
Like
Leave football for a year, and then you wait for the job you really want and jump into
exactly. Like the Saints cap space was in shambles. The talent was, I mean, like in terms of young talent, like they had Olave. That's kind of it, not a lot of other great pieces there. So like it would have been a while to clean that up. And Sean Payton said, you know what? I'm going to go do the media for a year and then I'll come back. I don't know if Bill would do the media, but who knows? Maybe he'll just be like, I don't really want to clean this up, wipe his hands of it and go somewhere else.
We'll see. But also it'd be very interesting because, for as long as he's been there, though, he at least had the culture already instilled. So once again, if he does go, interesting to see where he goes and if he'll be able to carry the same kind of culture and mantra that he was able to do for so long in New England, but hasn't really worked out the past few years. And it'd be interesting to see if he's purely the head coach, or whoever, if they do move on, if they give him personnel decision making, like basically, some coaches are both coach and GM, because I highly doubt that they give him GM, like we mentioned before, because they've missed on some pretty high draft picks in recent years and free agency. Some free agent guys that they, like Johnny Smith and such. I mean, Matt Judon was good, but there's still a few other, like Hunter Henry is kind of an overpay, but happens to free agency. But nonetheless, speaking of, you mentioned usually when you get a new quarterback, you got a leash. Well, for Frank Reich, he did not get that luxury. As let's go over to Carolina, where obviously after the game they let go of Frank Reich, but they also lost to the Tennessee Titans. Interesting enough, they got to see one of the quarterbacks they passed on, and Will Levis. I mean, not that he lit up the world this game either, but there's interesting that little aspect as Will Levis and the Titans get the win 17-10 over the Panthers. Score once again indicates that this one was pretty poor quality of football in a sense. But nonetheless, John, what were your thoughts in regards to these two?
I don't really have a ton of thoughts on this one either. Good on Derrick Henry. He was able to get 2 touchdowns. Wasn't the most efficient game, but honestly, considering the standard that Derrick Henry is kind of set this year, sadly, it was one of his better games regardless. Other than that, the Titans offense didn't really have much going for him. So, this looked like a prime Titans game, only when you're doing it against the 1-10 Panthers, it looks a lot less impressive. Like, this was one of those games that we'd expect out of the Titans like last year or 2 years ago when they were really good against one of the good teams. But, now they're having these kind of games against bad teams. So unfortunate for the Titans. Both teams probably not going to make the playoffs. Well, I think Carolina's basically
eliminated,
guaranteed. Yeah, I don't know the actual math on that, but I'm almost 99% sure they're probably already eliminated. Tennessee's the better team, but like, who really cares, to be honest?
Yeah,
I guess Chicago does because they get Carolina's pick, so they love the loss.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know much to say in this game. Like you mentioned, there wasn't much regard. It's very interesting to see this whole Tepper situation. It's seeming like he had his. I wish I could restore sort exactly where I heard this, but a lot of people were saying that I think it was Jake Glazer on Levitar Joe. He was mentioning how Tepper before he brought in your boy Matt Rule, but he was, I guess, more hands off with Matt Rule, let him do his thing. I guess obviously the result wasn't what he wanted, so it seems like he went the opposite way. Went with Frank Reich, and then obviously now he's, I guess, kudos to Tepper for just outright saying, yeah, he basically had that force the hand in trading and drafting Bryce Young, and like we mentioned before, still not fair to grade him amongst his peers, because even Will Levis didn't have that impressive a day if you're looking statistically. And Carolina's got a lot of holes to fill. Just be very interesting to see how they do so, though, like you already mentioned, because they don't have a first round pick this year, which once again they could really use. And it's definitely going to be it's looking like it's going to be at least probably number one, but hey, maybe it might be 2 or 3. But yeah, just wish, obviously wishing to have that inventory, and hey, maybe they could have figured out a different trade as to maybe not giving up DJ Moore or something. I don't know, but nonetheless, yeah, Titans get the job done, like you mentioned, and Panthers, they're still figuring it out. And yeah, I doubt changing the head coach is going to change much because, like we mentioned, this is not a very talented roster, especially skill position wise on offense. I think it was a good game for Jonathan Mingo. Maybe he can start building something. I know a lot of people are high on him coming out in the draft. Obviously, they were too. But yeah, like Adam Thielen, he had a very quiet game, and he's usually very dependable for them. And once again, like I said, if you're depending on Adam Thielen at this point in his career to be your main offense, you're in trouble. So that's why they're 1-10. It's just still weird. Oddly enough, they got that one win over the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. But at least they won't go 0-17. But who knows? 1-16 may be on the path for them. But we'll see if maybe new interim head coach energy, they can get at least another win to make it look better for them. But anyway, there is that. Let us move on over to the afternoon slot, where we're going to start with the LA Rams getting the win over the Arizona Cardinals, 37-14. Basically, welcome back Kyron Williams, as you will very well know, unfortunately, as Rams pretty much put the beat down here. What were your thoughts in regards to the Rams blowing out the Cardinals?
I definitely overestimated the Cardinals after the Falcons game. I thought that with Kyler, they would kind of have a rejuvenated offense, that they would be able to move the ball a lot better against the Rams. But, Sean Payton owns the Cardinals. There's that stat that's always floated around this division.
Yeah, Sean McVay.
Sean Payton. Sean McVay owns the Cardinals. Sean Payton might too, to be honest. I don't know his record against the Cardinals.
And also, in your defense, a lot of Seans in this head coach.
Yeah, a lot of Seans. McDermott, Payton, McVay, a lot of Seans. But McVay owns the Cardinals, and then Shanahan owns the Rams. So, yeah, like this division, it's very one-sided outside of like maybe Seattle, San Francisco. I'm not sure about Seattle's record versus everybody. But yeah, so McVay continues his dominance over this franchise. And I guess, honestly, using hindsight, it's not really surprising. The Cardinals are one of the worst teams in the NFL record-wise for a reason. Now, albeit a lot of that was without Kyler, but for the Windsor QB stat people, massive upgrade in terms of quarterback, at least the real ones. Some people will try to argue that Josh Dobbs is as good as Kyler, but it's come on. Let's not have recency bias because of 6 games.
I'm sure they're quiet.
So massive
now,
upgrade. Yeah, massive upgrade in terms of quarterback play, and yet you're unfortunately kind of getting the same results. So it's just how it goes. Honestly, nobody really expected the Cardinals to make much noise anyway once Kyler came back. It was more so the franchise just wanted to see him play because who knows, they're in a position where they could potentially draft a replacement if they wanted to. So, but Kyler's playing well. It's just honestly, after that first drive, the Rams just completely shut down their offense. Like that first drive from the Cardinals was a thing of beauty. They moved the ball down the field so easily. They made plays happen. Boom, they get the touchdown on the little read option play. And I was like, oh man, the Cardinals are about to be cooking this game. Nope. Rest of the first quarter, nothing. Rest of the second and third quarters, nothing. They got a touchdown late in the game. And I guess, there you go. So
yeah,
like, I don't know. It wasn't a great game from the Cardinals. And as you said, Kyron Williams, absolutely dominant. The guy had 200 yards and what was it, 3-4 touchdowns? So, yeah.
In regards to
2 touchdowns. Just 2.
He almost had a third a couple times. But yeah, I mean, just to sum what you said, I think it's just really, like we mentioned before the season, like just Arizona's, they've missed out. Cliff Kingsbury era, the big issue is that they missed out on a bunch of draft picks for the most part. And some of their, especially like second and third round picks, those are not the sexier picks, but those sometimes can be some of the staples of your team. They missed on some of those, and I think we're just seeing right now, obviously new regime. They're still trying to figure out, this their first year, and obviously they're not, as I'm alluding to, Arizona's just not as talented either side of the ball. I mean, Trey McBride's been a bright spot, and hopefully they can build off him. I'm assuming they're kind of still stuck with Marquise Brown. Rondell Moore, I know, has been dealing with injury, and hopefully he can be something. But obviously, we'll wait and see. Obviously, with how the rest of the season goes out in regards to grading Kyler. Will they keep him? Will they not? But I think it's important too to remember, like, he didn't have it. Once again, he was out for injury, didn't have a training camp with this new offense and new staff. I mean, he may have been there, but not actually doing the drills and such. And once again, it helps when you're live game action. This is his second game back. So and against a tough Rams divisional opponent that probably knows some of his tendencies and such. So I'm not gonna overreact in regards to the Cardinals and quote unquote poor performance from Kyler and the gang. He's still getting his feet wet in regards to getting back to NFL action. But good to see the Rams. And hey, we're talking about teams that may make a run late if if Kyron can keep having impact. Obviously not going to be as efficient as he was against the Cardinals, but a similar impact and role. Also, Tutu Atwell was pretty good for them as kind of like he was technically the leading receiver yards wise, but he was a good vertical deep threat for them to kind of open up some of the run game. And obviously, they'll get Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua going. The Rams could be one of those teams that get real hot, and many teams may not want to play them if they're firing on all cylinders, especially offensively, come January. But good. Big win for the Rams, like I mentioned, so they stay in that playoff contention, and we'll see what the Cardinals, how it looks going forward with them and Kyler, as they have 2 first-round picks to look forward to in April. But let's move on over to what was pretty much a defensive battle, although the score may not totally indicate it, although it was a scoregami, apparently, even though Sean Payton had no clue what that was, but I don't blame him. His job is to coach, not to know what scoregami is. As his Denver Broncos win 29-12 over the Cleveland Browns. As Dorian Thompson-Robinson unfortunately got knocked out of this one with an injury, but nonetheless, it was pretty much domination from the Denver Broncos, especially in the second half. What were your thoughts here, John, in regards to the Broncos? Just keep rolling, getting another win here.
They're starting to look pretty impressive. They've been playing some really good teams, and I don't feel like we can forget about that in regards to the streak that the Broncos are on. They beat the Bills, they beat the Chiefs, and although this is Dorian Thompson-Robinson-led offense, this is a really good Cleveland defense, and they started off really well against them. They looked good, and they were able to do whatever they really wanted offensively to start the game. Eventually, Cleveland did get back into it, but still Denver finally kind of, after the second half adjustments, started to figure it out again in the fourth quarter. So, I thought this was an incredibly impressive win for the Denver Broncos, and now they're sitting at 6-5. I don't know the streak that they're currently on.
5-game win streak.
In regards to 5-game win streak. So, they were 1-5. And I remember everybody was kind of making fun of them. They had lost to the Jets. Everybody's talking about, apologize to Nathaniel Hackett. Well, look at what Sean Payton has done to this franchise. They're 6-5 and maybe in the playoff hunt. So, good on Sean Payton. Good on this entire Broncos team, because what looked like a team that was potentially doomed to start the season. Everybody's talking about, you got to get rid of Russell Wilson's contract. He's having a great year. You got to trade these receivers. I don't know. They're making it work.
Yeah, just to add on what you're saying, I think they've found a very good style. They've been able to run the ball, especially this game. They had some good moments, and then just doing things off of that. And then also, I think what helps with Sean Payton is just kind of knowing the flow of the game. They were patient kind of at the beginning of the game, and were willing to kind of take what the defense gave them. Once again, was a little bit surprised that Cleveland got ran on, although it was a concern of mine at the beginning of the year, so that might be a concern going forward. And unfortunately for Cleveland, just a couple of injuries starting to pile up. We'll see if DTR will be back for them next week, or if they have to continue going with PJ Walker or Joe Flacco, because I know also in regards to their offense too, Amari Cooper got banged up here in this one as well. And so Cleveland may be slowly one of those teams that unfortunately slink out of the playoff race, despite such a good start and how great their defense is. Because also, I forgot, that was the third injury I was trying to remember too. It's Myles Garrett, although it looked like he'll play this week, but it seemed like he had some sort of arm or shoulder injury as he left the game in a sling, or at the stadium in a sling. So we'll see. But like you mentioned, good little resurgence for Russ and Sean Payton, and they're looking, and also the defense too, because the defense forcing turnovers, and you mentioned all the criticism for Denver too. Like people were criticizing like Sean Payton letting go of Randy Gregory and then Frank Clark, and people are like, what's going on in Denver? But it just seems like they're making more room for some of their other young pass rushers to get going. like Nick Benito, who had a sack and a half, and I believe forced the fumble, or I think it was a safety at the end of the game. So yeah, they got some talent there, and they could definitely be a dark horse if they keep riding this momentum going forward, and Russ keeps getting more confidence and more familiar with the system, and Sean Payton. But yeah, good, impressive win by Denver. Like you mentioned, they're rising up the rankings. They're 6-5, second in the division. Cleveland 7-4. Now they're third in their division, and especially if it comes down to tiebreakers, wild card wise, against Denver, Denver now has possibly a leg up on the Browns in regards to that. So that like I said, big and crucial win there for the Denver Broncos. But let's go on over to an AFC West divisional showdown between their two rivals, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs got back on track against the Las Vegas Raiders, 31-17. Although it didn't look that way at first. It looked like it was looking very scary as Raiders got up 14-0 early, but the Chiefs, kind of did typical Chiefs. They kind of turned it on and just won this game late, or not late, but won this game in convincing fashion late. But what were your thoughts in regards to the Chiefs bouncing back and getting the win over the Las Vegas Raiders?
I mean, it's the Raiders. The Chiefs historically kind of dominate this team, so I'm not going to sit here and act like this was a super impressive win because it's the Chiefs, right? Like, we expect this. That said, Rashee Rice had a good game, and that was very encouraging to see. Travis Kelce also had a little bit of a bounce-back week since he hasn't had the greatest string of performances the last handful of games. So, yeah, I thought this was a really good game just from that standpoint, because you're kind of hoping as we get towards the playoffs for the Chiefs that one of these young receivers can make themselves known and really become that trusted guy that they can start to scheme up plays for, and Mahomes can rely upon. And in this game, it was Rashee Rice. Now, once again, it is the Raiders, so I'm not going to sit here and say that Rashee Rice is going to be doing this in the playoffs against Miami or Baltimore or whoever the heck they play. But who knows? This could be the start of something for him. So certainly a standout performance and his best game of the year. And Mahomes had another really solid game. Like I said, Kelce had a good game. On the other side, honestly, I thought Aiden O'Connell had a pretty solid performance. Like, there was a point early in this game where, oh my gosh, it feels like, wait, are the Raiders going to potentially upset the Chiefs? Weren't they up 14-0?
Yeah.
And then Kansas City kind of storms back right before halftime to tie it up. And then Kansas City does what they do and they separate at half. But in terms of total yards, Kansas City 360 total yards. The Raiders had 358. So they were right there. They made big plays. They did it both with the air and the ground. Josh Jacobs, he had a good performance too, over 100 yards on the ground. Neither team turned the ball over. Neither team allowed a ton of sacks. The Raiders didn't have any penalties. Honestly, from a pure just coaching and it felt like the Raiders checked all the boxes for the team that is the underdog in this game. Here's how you got to win. You can't have penalties. Boom, they had 0, not a single one. You can't turn it over. Boom, they didn't turn it over. You can't let the other team have massive time possession. They only had it was a minute difference between them and the Chiefs. All these kind of things. You got to be efficient on third down. They were actually more efficient than Kansas City was on third down. All these kind of check marks. It's just unfortunate that Kansas City just has a lot better talent. That's just really what it came down to. So, I mean, for the Raiders, I'm not a moral victory kind of guy, but because you have an interim head coach, I think for Antonio Pierce and that staff, you can look at this and be like, man, we didn't win, but there was a lot of bright, positive spots and moments in this game for the Raiders that they can take away from and just say, if we can build upon these moving forward and maybe even into next year. I don't want to fully look next year because at 5-7, they're not out of it by any means. They could still maybe make a run. I don't know the schedule and what it looks like. I think they probably still have to play Kansas City again. I might be wrong on that, but yeah, there's a lot that they could build upon here, because if they can continue some of those things in the next few weeks, I mean, it should bear results against worse teams that are not the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, it's very interesting, their closing schedule. So they go Vikings, Chargers, at Chiefs, at Colts, and then Broncos. So all teams that are also kind of gunning
in the
mix. Yeah, so it's not no easy way out for them, for the Las Vegas Raiders in regards to trying to sneak in to that playoff race. But yeah, I mean, only one thing I want to add is just we've mentioned this before with the Raiders, and this is I think it's just a fair criticism. Is just there's lacking playmakers on defense outside of Max Crosby, and even he was hampered in this game. I mean, he was doubtful going into it. I know he still had a sack, but once again, no one else on that defense really making an impact or scaring you at the linebacker level in the secondary. They may have some solid pieces, but still lacking some firepower there. I know Tyree Wilson, the first round pick, got off to a slow start, and sometimes it happens with pass rushers. So hopefully, as the season goes on, maybe he can end the year well and have something to build off of going into the offseason, and they can put that lower on their priority as another pass rusher if he starts popping off. But yeah, like you mentioned, just if they did everything right except they just needed to get stops on defense, and they fortunately weren't able to do so at certain moments, especially in the second half. So, and really, I want to once again further add kudos to the Chiefs defense. I know they let up the big Josh Jacobs run, but other than that, you take out that that running the ball wise, Vegas had issues, and Aiden O'Connell was solid, but he's still a young rookie that was a late round rookie for a reason, and you see those limitations. So yeah, we'll see how they keep building going forward, how they bounce back, because they're on a little bit of a hot streak, and then now they've kind of cooled off. And for the Chiefs, I think we mentioned before too, like Rashee Rice, he's had some solid outings. It's just this obviously his best one, and if he can just, I'm not expecting 100 yards and a touchdown every week, but at least be consistent. Be the consistent other option outside of Travis Kelce, and I'm sure the other dominoes will fall in place. And so the Sky Moores and maybe Kadarius Toney's or MVS's making a couple of plays to support that for Kansas City. But yeah, crucial win for the Chiefs, as I mentioned, with regards to that kind of wild race at the top between them, the Ravens and the Jaguars and the Dolphins, all kind of stuck up there, and no room for error there. But let's go over, speaking of no room for error, to what many are already dubbing the game of the year for this year, and it was quite a good one. So we'll see if it does stand the test of time for the rest of the year, as it was the Philadelphia Eagles. Despite looking like they were down this game and had some penalties, especially that last drive in regulation, didn't matter as they force overtime and they win over the Buffalo Bills 37-34, ripping the hearts out of Josh Allen, the Bills basically. But what were your thoughts here in regards to your known hated rival Eagles yet again for it seems like out of the past 2 weeks pulling one out in the clutch?
I'll just keep this short and simple, man. I was so upset that Buffalo gave away this lead, man. Like going into that fourth quarter, I was like, wow, like Buffalo's gonna actually beat them. I picked Buffalo in my pick'em for our gambling stuff.
You got it right there.
Doing the thing. I mean, I got it right, but like I picked them because I thought that Buffalo would win, because my whole point was like, I think this is going to be a huge Josh Allen game. He's going to bounce back. He's going to torch this secondary, because once again, the Eagles secondary is not good. Like people love to give credit to Slay and Bradbury and some of these guys. The secondary is not good, man. Like they might be okay individual corners, but I think the respect that they get is honestly a lot more name brand value than actual play on the field, because as a unit, like when they play good offenses, this secondary gets exposed. They get torched. And Josh Allen did it. Like he did everything that I wanted from him. It's just the defense could not hold up. Like, and it's kind of unfortunate, because this is kind of the story of the Bills in a lot of big games. Like you think back to that playoff game against the Chiefs, and everybody talks about the 13 seconds and all that stuff. It's like the defense was what failed in that game. Josh can have these like legendary games, and they aren't able to find ways to win because the defense just doesn't stand as strong as they do in some of these other performances. So yeah, I mean, frustrating to see Philly win that one, because I felt like if Buffalo could have won it, that could have maybe opened the door for Dallas to maybe take the division, but it's still possible. But at the end of the day, the Eagles, man, they keep finding ways to win, and that's as much as I can sit here and be upset about it and all this kind of stuff. Like that's what good teams do. It doesn't matter who you play. You play the opponents in front of you. Buffalo is obviously better than a 6-6 team, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree with that. I think in terms of talent they are. It's just they're dealing with the injuries and all that stuff that have kind of, and they've had a little bit of a rough stretch that have kind of led them to this point. But clearly they showed they were able to go toe to toe with one of the best teams in the league because they have that kind of ability. But at the end of the day, Philly just came out on top. So good win for the Eagles. Like I can't hate on it.
Yeah,
it was a solid win.
Yeah, it was, and I think, and you see a little bit of talent discrepancy in regards to that. Because I forget the exact number, but Jalen Hurts only had like 50 yards passing in the first half. Like it was a rough first half for Jalen Hurts, and yet the Eagles still were in that game. And it kind of, especially even the weather is real. It started getting rainy, real wet. Kind of played to their favor in regards to they're a more physical team. They're more patient with the run. And they just, as I think you're seeing just how good they are. They're going to eventually make plays, and AJ Brown didn't have a great game, but still managed to find the end zone. Devonta Smith was able to step up, and once again, this is without Dallas Goedert. So if he's here, who knows how much more he adds. Swift still had a really good game, and even like I said, running the ball, they ran the ball really well against the Bills, and it was just like you mentioned, the defense of the Bills kind of let them down here, and it's been one of their concerns is really, like I've mentioned before, especially against big time teams, playoff caliber elite teams. Their defense has, like you said, against the Chiefs, against the Bengals last year, the Bengals could not be stopped at all. Really, their offense just did whatever they wanted last year. So that kind of falls on Sean McDermott. I know there's injuries and stuff, but you invested. You still have Greg Rousseau and all these other, Leonard Floyd and AJ Epinesa, all these guys that you invested. And I'm not sure if Von Miller played this game. I don't see him at all, even in the box score. He may have played, and if he did, he didn't have an impact. So there you go. That's a lot of free agent money that they gave him. And I know that you don't foresee the ACL injury, but still, even then, like he was an older pass rusher, so you never know.
Right.
So I think we're starting to see oof. And then Ed Oliver, he's been okay.
And to be fair, he was dealing with injuries before they got him too. So it's not like you didn't see this coming.
Yeah,
this
wasn't a surprise red flag. This was kind of already a red flag to begin with. And I know they've kind of hit on Terrell Bernard's out. Definitely been better than what he was drafted for. But then, like I mentioned, like Ed Oliver, he's good, but once again, I mentioned all those other edge guys that they're kind of okay. I dare say mid. Meanwhile, in Green Bay, and I didn't even mention him when we did our breakdown, but Rashawn Gary, he's been balling, and he was picked one pick after Ed Oliver. I'm just saying. So, Buffalo. Injuries, I feel like I say this every week, injuries are going to be a part of the NFL, and it's tough to use that excuse, but Buffalo feels a lot like the Packers and Rodgers when it was the end of the McCarthy days, when it's like we have these games where Josh Allen, yes, he had the one interception and led to points, but Jalen Hurts had an interception and he also fumbled the ball as well. But guess what? His team's so good, and his team, and once again, Jalen Hurts is good too, but the team around him is so good that hey, we got you, Jalen. Like, they pick up the slack in other ways. Well, Josh Allen, he has that one mistake. He's their leading rusher. They aren't in this game without him, basically. Like literally, they aren't even in this game if it's another quarterback. So I just wanted to state that because Josh Allen haters are all out in force, and I wanted to bring up too the numbers because I mentioned earlier. Hey, like why aren't we giving Dak some love? But once again, I know Josh Allen's leading the league in interceptions, but once again, it's not like this huge egregious amount where he has 13. Mac Jones, has 12, but Mac Jones, he's in different class. But even Tua and Jalen Hurts, where is it? Oh, that's AFC. Sorry. Tua's got 10 interceptions, played one less game. So and the way he's been kind of turning the ball over lately, like we mentioned with that one, so he could easily match that. And Jalen Hurts threw one in this game, and he has 10 interceptions too. But and
he's got, I think, more fumbles than Josh.
Yes, he
around the same amount. So
So once again, it feels like it's just a lazy way out in regards to the fact that the Bills need to do more supportive. Like we've been saying in the past year, like, can you get him another real weapon? I know this was finally a Gabe Davis showing game, but very unlikely. I'm sorry that Gabe Davis is going to show up, put up another 100-yard touchdown game, next week or week after. He hasn't been that consistent. So, that's all I really wanted to mention in regards to that. Is just like
I want to add two things whenever you're done.
Yeah.
No, finish what you're saying.
Yeah, like I was saying, like a little bit about with the Dak thing, where it's like, okay, like we were going to sit here and scrutinize, Josh Allen this much. Can we, even though that there's other caveats and reasons where he is the offense, he is the team. So, kind of like what I mentioned, just to throw a basketball phrase, like, yeah, sometimes Luka could be inefficient, Luka Doncic, but it's because they literally they don't win without putting the ball in his hands and him making all the plays. So, anyways, yeah, that's pretty much my little rant over. What are you going to add?
I was just gonna say that on the Josh Allen thing. I mean, let's talk about the turnovers, right? Like right now, unfortunately, after Monday night, Josh no longer leads the NFL in turnovers. So for all the people making that point, it's now Josh Dobbs who, because of the difference in expectations, nobody's talking about Josh Dobbs like they were talking about Josh Allen, right? Nobody's saying, oh, like the turnovers are the true problem here. Like nobody did that for Dobbs because they recognized that those teams were bad. And also, just in general, like you talked about, like Josh Allen has 16 turnovers on the year. Tua has 14. Hurts has 14. Like, these are two of the better teams in the NFL, and they have 2 less turnovers. Are we really going to say that the 2 more turnovers that Josh Allen has is the reason that his team is 6-6? And if he had 2 less, that they would be what Philadelphia is? No, because clearly, like you said, the teams are better. And so the reason that everybody's praising Jalen Hurts, despite the fact that he has less touchdown, less yards, less everything, the only key indicator that he is better at is less turnovers by 2. It's the whole Windsor a QB stat thing shrouded in the whole, like, if Josh Allen was 10-1, they would be saying he is people would be talking about him like he's the undisputed MVP pick right now because he's got the most yards, the most touchdowns, the most everything. Like, he is dominating the league statistically. So I wanted to throw that out there. And I can't remember what my second point was going to be.
That's okay.
On the injury thing, you were talking about, like, injuries are a part of football. You got to be prepared. We just talked about the Colts. Anthony Richardson gets hurt. Well, guess what? They have Gardner Minshew. Jonathan Taylor gets hurt. They went out and they traded for Zach Moss, and he's been putting in work. Like, this is a team that,
by the way,
is making the most of, like, all right, we have injuries, replacements. My Dallas Cowboys. Remember when Trayvon Diggs, one of the best corners in the league, got hurt to start the season? And how nobody has really talked about this Cowboys secondary like they've missed a beat. Oh, yeah, that's because they drafted Deron Bland in the 5th round, and he's been an absolute steal in the draft. Like, obviously, he's highly over-exceeding expectations, but a great draft pick from the Cowboys. They go out and they trade for Stephon Gilmore in the offseason to shore up the depth. They still have Jordan Lewis, who's been a long-time starter for them for years, that can fill in the nickel there. So, like, they had the depth, right? Like, these are teams that were prepared in the case of injuries. They made sure to have depth at these positions where an injury might occur, and these are very important positions, right? Like your QB. For the Colts, they're a run-heavy team. You need to have a good backup running back. For the Cowboys, they want to rely on their defense and their secondary. Stephon Gilmore is also a little bit old, so what do? You shore up the cornerback room. So I don't know, just I agree with your point on, like, Buffalo was not necessarily fully prepared for some of these injuries that have, unfortunately occurred. And I mean, God forbid if a Stephon Diggs injury happened. And this was a point that I made 2 years ago. I said they are a Stephon Diggs injury away from this wide receiver core being pretty bad. And I remember I got kind of shredded by the Bills fans in the comments of that video because they were talking, we got Gabe Davis, which at the point I didn't even know who Gabe Davis was. So that, there was that, but like it was just, they didn't have a lot of depth. It was literally like John Brown, Cole Beasley, like these were the guys that were around Stephon Diggs, our young, like, second year Gabe Davis that hadn't proven anything yet, and he hasn't really proven that much, to be honest. So yeah, if Stephon Diggs was to go down, like, Buffalo would be royally screwed.
Yeah, or Josh Allen, one of the two. If one of those, like we've said before,
if Josh Allen goes down, they're done.
Yeah.
I don't think they win another game, to be honest.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, though that is the engine there as much as so. We'll see. If the Bills can somehow turn around, and obviously their work's cut out for them at 6-6 to try to make it to the playoffs. And yeah, just once again to add to your point about those other guys being right behind him in turnovers too. Just want to add too. Josh has played one more game than those other guys. He finally gets his bye week this week, so even next week we can finally have a quote unquote fair tally in regards to all that. And then, like we mentioned, even before then, at least Tua, we've seen the run game go off, and most certain them. So that's taking a little bit of load off. And same with the Eagles. Like, as much as great as Hurts is, like they still having a great run game, and their defense, while it's been disappointing in recent weeks, still has made play, especially against lesser opponents. So, big win for the Eagles, and a very, very tough loss for the Bills as they head into their bye week. Obviously, you had that one in your hands, and for the most part, they were kind of the better in control for most of the game. They just, good team like the Eagles, they're going to find a way to make moves at the end of the game, and Bills could not sustain. But anyhow, let us move on to the Sunday night game, and it was between the Baltimore Ravens and LA Chargers. Ravens take care of business, beating the Chargers 20-10. What were your thoughts here in regards to the Ravens handling their business?
Good defensive performance from the Ravens. I will say early in the game, they kind of got away with that hit on Herbert, but I don't know if it would have drastically changed the outcome of this game. Maybe the Chargers get a touchdown there instead of a field goal, but they lost by 2 scores, and I think that maybe the Ravens would have been a little bit more aggressive if they needed to be later in the game. But yeah, for the Chargers, man, we're seeing the same issues. Defense isn't great. It's literally just Keenan Allen. Austin Eckler on the ground has been inefficient. He averaged 3 yards a carry. Herbert was their leading rusher with 47 rushing yards. Like, it's not great. And it's unfortunate because they attempted to mitigate the potential Mike Williams injury problems, right? Like, this is not necessarily a Bills situation where one injury screws them, right? Like, they took Quentin Johnson in the first round. They had Josh Palmer, who was, getting better and better, increasing his role. Palmer gets injured. Johnson hasn't really lived up to his draft potential. Gerald Everett had been missing time. He's finally back. He gets a touchdown, but if he's having to be your second best receiver, something's wrong. Like, he's supposed to be your 4th, 5th option. Eckler was supposed to be solid this year. He's been largely inefficient, and I think we're just starting to see this is why the Chargers did not want to pay him all the money that he was asking for, and it's the unfortunate reality of the running back position. It's just how it goes. And to Eckler's credit, he was dealing with injuries at this point this year, or early in the year, so I don't want to say that it's that he's just completely washed or anything. There could be other factors. The offensive line play from the Chargers has not been the greatest this year as well. There's just a lot of stuff going on with the Chargers, man. And although, I don't know if this wasn't a game that anybody expected the Chargers to win. It still just feels increasingly more likely that Brandon Staley is going to get fired, because as much as we harp on the fact that the defense hasn't been great for them, when you're the head coach, you're responsible for everything. Like, we can't excuse you just because of one side of the ball that you are a specialist in, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Overall, good win from the Ravens. They didn't really have to do too much offensively to get it because their defense held strong. But offensively, they did their thing. They found ways to get their playmakers involved, like Zay Flowers. Keaton Mitchell is kind of starting to come on. He is an explosive playmaker for them. So, yeah. Good win for the Ravens overall.
Yeah, only thing I want to notate is just, for the Chargers, we said before, I mentioned it, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, like how, hey, oftentimes your identity is kind of linked to your head coach. And once again, I think we said it last time because they had a bunch of mistakes. Four turnovers for the Chargers, and that's tough in regards to the Ravens. And on a day where, like you mentioned, the Chargers defense kind of did hold up their end of the bargain. It was a tough sledding for the Ravens offense, especially, they didn't really get their run game going as much as they would like to. And Jose Flowers kind of inflates their overall average. I know Keaton Mitchell it was efficient, but other than that, not really much. And even in the pass game too, like it was tough sledding for Lamar and the gang. There wasn't a lot of explosive plays there, but yeah, you turn on the ball over 4 times. Yeah, 3 of them fumbles too. Like, unfortunately, I think it's the last 3 drives of the first half. It was fumble. It was the Eckler fumble, led to a field goal, and then another fumble. I think that was a Herbert got that one, and then they throw an interception in the half. That was a Hail Mary. So that's we will not count that one because Hail Mary. But I know
I don't count Hail Mary picks.
So in reality, 3 turnovers because they also had one on their second drive of the second half where they were knocking on the door, and I think and they fumbled there too. So just blowing their opportunities and such, and and like we mentioned before, just unfortunate that Quentin Johnson really hasn't blossomed yet. Once again, it's still his first year. Maybe sometimes some people have different timelines. So maybe he'll come more online. Maybe as the season goes on, we'll see. But yeah, it seems like writing's on the wall, like we've been saying for Brandon Staley in the gang. And yeah, crucial window for the Ravens, like I mentioned, as they go to 9-3. I believe they're going to their bye week too. So they're going to win the bye week no matter what. Even if the other teams right behind them get a win, they'll be all 9-3. So I'm not sure how the tiebreakers work, but I don't know. Regardless, Baltimore's sitting pretty as they move on into December as well. While the Chargers, we'll see basically how long it'll take. Days are numbered for Mr. Staley. But anyhow, let's move over last and definitely least to the Monday night game where the Bears win 12-10. It was an ugly game of sorts, especially from the Pastronauts, as 4 interceptions. A couple of them were kind of crazy, wild deflections. A couple of them not great decisions by him. And so nonetheless, Bears win. John, what were your thoughts in regards to them just basically eking this one out?
I just gonna be honest, I don't really have thoughts. They got the win, but it really just came down to like everything you just said. The Vikings, they just shot themselves in the foot far too many times in this game. Like they allowed 2 sacks, they had 4 penalties, they had 4 turnovers. Like 2 of them weren't totally his fault, but at the end of the day, like it's not going to get it done. So yeah, and Chicago getting the win, I mean, all that really does is hurt their draft position, if we're being real. So,
well, here's one of their draft positions. The other ones are like, we're good. We got Carolina's pick. So, it'd be very interesting because, like, obviously for Chicago, it's going forward for them. It's, hey, like, what do we got, Justin Fields? And I will say, numbers don't look great, but especially in regards to that late drive in the fourth quarter to put them up. And a couple other handful of moments. Like, he looked good, and especially the connection, DJ Moore seems to be there. And, I think as of right now, and obviously I haven't looked at all the quarterbacks coming out, I'm more leaning to, hey, Chicago, like, just buy in. Just, you got 2 picks. Like, go the Philly route. Like, just build around this guy. Build the base of your offensive line. Like, it's good, but it could be better. I'm not sure. Once again, I haven't looked at offensive line prospects. But, as of right now, I think you just got to build them because the defense is starting to come a little bit. There's some pieces there. Obviously, you got to convince Jalen Johnson, maybe to stay long term. But Montez Sweat seems to be a great investment for them. He had 1 half sacks this game and it's kind of wreaking havoc. Guys like Jaquan Brisker, their safety, he could be solid. Same with Eddie Jackson, like solid. Obviously, I would, you would prefer another blue chip guy on defense, and maybe they find that via the draft. But I mean, Chicago's got a lot of good going. I'm not gonna say they're making the playoffs, obviously, but it'd be interesting to see their what decision they make going forward. And I think too they'll have a lot of cap space as well. I'm assuming, since I can't really think of anybody outside of DJ Moore that's bringing in a lot of money in terms of of his second contract. And then for the Vikings, it sucks because Brian Flores is doing a great job with his defense. They've made life tough on the Chicago offense, and for Joshua Dobbs, like we said, like the expectations are lower, so that's why it's like, oh, he threw 4 interceptions, or really 2 were mainly his fault. Like, oh, okay, tough for him, and it'll be interesting to see if they do make a change. Once again, I don't foresee it being all that different, but maybe they believe more in Nick Mullins, and Nick Mullins has been there longer, so maybe in regards to the offense flowing better, he might be a better option. But we'll see what they do, as the Vikings also going into their bye week as well, so they'll have an extra time to reassess the quarterback position if they want to make a change there. But not much else to add, as Bears win and they handle their business. As Vikings, obviously this hurts their playoff chances, but even if they made the playoffs, like we just said, they have Joshua Dobbs. I don't think many people are sitting here saying they're gonna make a run. They're gonna run the table and they can make noise in the playoffs. Like, yeah, they might run the table, but I really don't think that they'll. I don't think anybody will think they'll make the playoffs outside of Minnesota, or not make the playoffs, but make noise in the playoffs. So, there is that. There's a Monday Nighter, and there's that's all the Week 12 games. Literally every team covered since there are no bye weeks. So. There should be no complaints in regards to you didn't cover my team. I didn't miss a game, unlike a week or 2 ago when we just completely left out. I think it was Atlanta, Arizona. Anything else you wanted to add before we call it there?
That's gonna be it.
You heard John. That will be it. As always, feel free to rate, review, and comment. Wherever you're watching or listening. But other than that, like I said, we'll be back in a day or two if you're watching, later in the week, basically, to share our Week 13 picks against the spread / bets also. But otherwise, you all enjoy your week, and we'll see you all next